The graduation dinner at Rosewood Manor was supposed to be a celebration. My cousin Jessica had just finished her MBA at Northwestern, and Aunt Carol had spared no expense for the family gathering. The private dining room overlooked the lake. The menu featured dishes that cost more per plate than most people spend on groceries in a week, and the guest list included 3 generations of the Morrison family. I should have been happy for Jessica. She'd worked hard for her degree, landed a consulting job at McKinsey, and clearly had a bright future ahead. The problem was that every family gathering had become an opportunity for relatives to analyze my life choices and find them wanting. "Jessica's starting at $140,000, Aunt Carol announced proudly, raising her wine glass. "Plus signing bonus and benefits. A real career with real opportunities." The table murmured appreciative congratulations. Jessica smiled modestly, though she was clearly pleased with the attention. At 26, she represented everything the family considered success: prestigious education, corporate job, clear advancement path. I sat at the other end of the table, quietly eating my salmon and listening to the familiar rhythm of family expectations. At 29, I was the one who'd disappointed everyone by choosing a different path. "And what about you, Alex?" Uncle Robert asked, turning his attention my way with the slightly forced enthusiasm relatives use when addressing family disappointments. "Still working on your little projects?" The little projects reference made me smile internally. It was how they described my work for the past 7 years, ever since I'd graduated from college and declined the corporate recruiting offers that had impressed them so much. "Still keeping busy," I replied diplomatically. "Busy with what exactly?" Aunt Carol pressed, her tone suggesting she already knew the answer wouldn't meet her standards. "Last I heard, you were doing something with computers?" "Technology consulting," I clarified. "I help companies optimize their digital infrastructure and investment strategies." Jessica leaned forward with genuine interest. "That sounds fascinating. What kind of companies?" Before I could answer, Aunt Carol waved dismissively. "It's one of those internet things. Websites and apps and whatever. Not a real business." Uncle Robert nodded knowingly. "The problem with that industry is there's no stability. Today's technology is obsolete tomorrow. You need something with solid fundamentals." "Like hospitality," Aunt Carol added, gesturing toward the elegant dining room around us. "People will always need places to stay, quality service, real experiences. That's why our hotel chain has been profitable for 15 years. She wasn't wrong about the profitability. Morrison Hospitality Group had grown from a single boutique hotel to a chain of 12 properties across the Midwest. Aunt Carol had built it methodically, focusing on business travelers and weekend getaways in second-tier cities. It was impressive work and genuinely successful. What she didn't know was that I'd been studying her business model for years. Not out of family loyalty, but because Morrison Hospitality represented exactly the kind of traditional industry that technology disruption could transform. They'd built their success on information asymmetry, location advantages, and customer service differentials that were increasingly obsolete in the digital age. "The key," Uncle Robert continued, "is building something tangible. Hotels, restaurants, retail spaces. Things people can see and touch. Real assets," Aunt Carol agreed. "Not computer files that could disappear overnight." Cousin David, Jessica's older brother, joined the conversation from across the table. "Alex, no offense, but don't you think it's time to consider a more traditional career path? You're almost 30. The comment stung, though I tried not to show it. The assumption that my age somehow invalidated my choices was familiar territory in family discussions. "I mean," David continued, "what's your 5-year plan? Your 10-year plan? How do you build wealth and stability with internet consulting?" It was a fair question, delivered with what seemed like genuine concern. David worked in commercial real estate, owned a house in the suburbs, drove a BMW, and represented everything the family considered responsible adulthood. "Those are important considerations," I agreed, not wanting to start an argument at Jessica's celebration dinner. That's when Aunt Carol delivered the verdict that would change everything. She set down her wine glass with the definitive click that always preceded her most authoritative pronouncements. Her expression was patient but firm, like a teacher explaining basic concepts to a struggling student. "Alex, honey," she began, using the tone she'd perfected over 15 years of family gatherings, "I think we all care about you too much to keep pretending this is working. The table went quiet, sensing that something significant was about to be said. "You're a smart person," she continued, "but you're living in a fantasy. This whole entrepreneur thing, the technology consulting, the flexible lifestyle, it's not sustainable." Uncle Robert nodded supportively. "Carol's built a real business. She understands what it takes. The hospitality industry requires serious capital, operational expertise, regulatory compliance, staff management," Aunt Carol explained. "Real business skills that take years to develop." She looked around the table, gathering support from relatives who'd been having similar conversations about my career choices for years. "What you're doing isn't entrepreneurship," she concluded with absolute certainty. "It's playing pretend. Stop playing pretend entrepreneur and get a real job like normal people." The relatives nodded in agreement, their expressions mixing concern with relief that someone had finally said what they'd all been thinking. Jessica looked uncomfortable, probably wishing her graduation dinner hadn't become an intervention about my life choices. I simply said, "Good advice." The conversation moved on to other topics. Jessica's apartment search in Chicago, David's real estate deals, plans for the family vacation. I continued eating quietly, participating when directly addressed, but mostly listening to discussions about careers and life paths that made sense to everyone except me. After dinner, I congratulated Jessica privately and drove home to my modest apartment, thinking about Aunt Carol's comments. The pretend entrepreneur phrase echoed in my head, along with the certainty in her voice when she dismissed everything I'd worked toward for 7 years. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was exactly what I'd been building during those 7 years of playing pretend. It had started during my senior year of college when I developed a simple app for managing study groups. Nothing revolutionary, just a tool that helped students coordinate schedules and share resources. But it had taught me about user experience, market research, and the gap between what people said they wanted and what they actually used. After graduation, I turned down corporate job offers and used the app development skills to start freelance consulting. Small projects at first, helping local businesses build websites, optimizing their online presence, developing simple software solutions for operational problems. The work was interesting and profitable, but more importantly, it gave me insight into how traditional businesses operated and where technology could create efficiencies. I started seeing patterns across industries, understanding how digital transformation could unlock value in unexpected places. By year 3, I wasn't just building websites. I was analyzing business models, identifying investment opportunities, and developing strategies for technology-driven growth. The consulting work was funding a much larger project, building an investment portfolio focused on companies that were transforming traditional industries. By year 5, that portfolio was worth $12 million. By year 7, it had grown to over $200 million. And as of this month, my technology-focused investment portfolio was valued at approximately $750 million. None of my family knew, of course. Why would they? I lived modestly, drove a reliable but unremarkable car, and talked about technology consulting in vague terms that didn't invite detailed questions. My success was built on understanding market dynamics they dismissed as fantasy, investing in companies they didn't comprehend, and generating returns from businesses they considered not real. The morning after Jessica's graduation dinner, I was reviewing portfolio performance when my investment manager called. "Good morning, Alex. I wanted to discuss the hospitality sector holdings." Rebecca Martinez had been managing my investments for 4 years, ever since my portfolio had grown beyond what I could handle personally. She was brilliant, discreet, and completely focused on results rather than explanations. "What's the situation?" I asked, though I suspected I knew where the conversation was heading. "Several of our positions are underperforming projections. Traditional hotel chains, restaurant groups, hospitality management companies. The sector is facing significant headwinds from technology disruption." I pulled up the relevant files on my computer, scanning performance data for companies I'd been tracking for months. The numbers told a clear story. Traditional hospitality businesses were struggling to compete with platform-based alternatives that offered better pricing, more flexibility, and superior user experiences. "What's your recommendation?" "Divest the entire sector. $750 million in holdings, representing about 43% of your current portfolio. The capital could be redeployed to higher growth opportunities in fintech and sustainable technology." I looked at the list of companies we'd be selling, noting which ones supplied services to Morrison Hospitality Group. Aunt Carol's business was built on relationships with exactly the kind of traditional suppliers and service providers that were becoming obsolete. Execute the divestiture, I decided. Full liquidation by end of week. All $750 million? All of it. What I didn't mention was that the hospitality sector divestiture would do more than just improve my portfolio performance. It would also eliminate funding for the suppliers, service providers, and business partners that companies like Morrison Hospitality Group depended on for their operations. Rebecca handled the logistics with her usual efficiency. By Wednesday, every hospitality-related holding in my portfolio had been sold. $750 million moved from traditional hotel and restaurant companies to technology investments that were generating 20 to 30% annual returns. The market reaction was immediate. Thursday morning, Aunt Carol called me for the first time in months. "Alex, I need to ask you something strange." Her voice was tight with stress I'd never heard before. "Do you know anything about investment funds or institutional investors?" "Some," I replied carefully. "Why?" "Our suppliers are having problems. The linen service company, the food distributor, the maintenance contractors, they're all saying they've lost major funding and might have to reduce operations or raise prices." I made appropriate concerned noises while opening my laptop to check the specific companies she was mentioning. All of them had been part of my hospitality sector holdings. "It's weird," she continued. "It's not just one or two companies. It's like someone pulled funding from the entire industry all at once." "That does sound unusual," I agreed. "Morrison Hospitality depends on these relationships. If our operating costs increase by 20 or 30% because suppliers are struggling." She didn't finish the sentence, but I understood the implication. Her profit margins would disappear. Friday afternoon, the situation escalated. "Alex." Aunt Carol's voice was barely controlled panic. "I need help. Professional help. Do you know anyone in finance or business consulting?" "What's happening?" "Our bank called. They're reviewing our credit lines because they're concerned about hospitality sector stability. 3 of our major suppliers have declared bankruptcy. Our insurance company is raising premiums. It's like the entire industry is collapsing." He was right, of course. When institutional investors withdraw $750 million from a sector, the ripple effects can be devastating. Companies that depended on that funding for operations suddenly couldn't meet payroll, fulfill contracts, or maintain service levels. "Is there anything I can do to help?" I asked. "I don't know. Maybe. You said you do technology consulting. Do you understand financial systems? Investment analysis? Business restructuring?" It was an opening I'd been waiting 7 years to receive. "I have some experience with those areas," I said. "Would you like me to take a look at Morrison Hospitality's situation?" "Could you? I know the family hasn't always been supportive of your career choices. But I'm desperate. I don't know who else to ask." Sunday afternoon, I met Aunt Carol at her corporate office for the first time since I'd been a college student. The Morrison Hospitality Group headquarters was modest but professional, a reflection of her practical approach to business development. She'd prepared comprehensive financial statements, operational reports, and strategic analyses that demonstrated both her business competence and the seriousness of her current crisis. Morrison Hospitality was genuinely successful, but it was also completely dependent on industry relationships that were dissolving in real time. "The numbers look solid," I told her after reviewing everything. "But you're right about the sector-wide problems. Someone did pull major funding from hospitality investments this week." "Do you know who?" I considered how to answer that question honestly. I have some insight into the institutional investment patterns that caused this disruption. Could you help us navigate it? Maybe find alternative suppliers, restructure our service contracts, identify new funding sources. Possibly. But it would require significant strategic changes. Morrison Hospitality would need to embrace technology integration, digital transformation, operational efficiency improvements. Aunt Carol looked skeptical. "You mean the internet stuff you've been working on?" "Among other things, yes." She was quiet for a long moment, weighing pride against necessity. "What would that look like?" "Over the next 2 hours, I walked through a comprehensive restructuring plan that would modernize Morrison Hospitality's operations while preserving the service quality that had made them successful. It was technically complex, operationally challenging, and entirely feasible with proper implementation. "This is sophisticated work," she said finally. "Where did you learn business analysis like this?" 7 years of technology consulting taught me how traditional industries can adapt to digital disruption. I've helped dozens of companies navigate similar transitions. "And you think this would work for Morrison Hospitality?" "I think it's your best option for surviving the current market conditions." Aunt Carol gathered the documents I'd prepared, her expression thoughtful. "Alex, I owe you an apology. What you've shown me today, this isn't pretend entrepreneurship." "No, it's not. What would you charge for consulting work like this?" I smiled, thinking about her comments at Jessica's graduation dinner just 1 week earlier. "My standard rate is $250,000 for comprehensive strategic restructuring." Her eyes widened. $250,000? Plus equity participation if the plan succeeds. Usually 5 to 10% ownership stake. "You charge that much for technology consulting?" "I charge that much for saving companies from industry-wide disruption caused by institutional investment withdrawal." The irony hit her all at once. The pretend entrepreneur she'd dismissed was now offering to save her business from the very market forces I'd helped create. "The investment withdrawal," she said slowly. "Do you know who was behind it?" I looked out the window at the Morrison Hospitality building, thinking about 7 years of family gatherings where my career had been dismissed as fantasy while I'd been building a portfolio worth $750 million. Someone who understood that traditional hospitality businesses were vulnerable to technology disruption and decided to reallocate capital to higher growth opportunities. "Do you know them personally?" "You could say that." Aunt Carol was quiet for a long moment, processing implications that extended beyond business restructuring. "Alex, exactly how successful has your technology consulting been?" "Successful enough to fund strategic investments in multiple sectors while maintaining a primary portfolio value of approximately $750 million. The silence in that room was complete. $750 million? As of Friday's market close. "And you're offering to help Morrison Hospitality survive a crisis that your investments, that my investment strategy inadvertently created?" "Yes." Aunt Carol looked at the strategic analysis I'd prepared, then back at me. "Why?" It was a fair question. Why would I help fix a problem I'd caused? Why would I offer consulting services to save a business owned by someone who'd spent years dismissing my career as pretend? Because Morrison Hospitality is a good company that deserves to survive industry changes. And because your family, even when you don't understand what I do for a living. She was quiet for another moment. "What happens if we don't implement these changes?" "Honestly, Morrison Hospitality will probably fail within 6 months. The supplier disruptions, increased costs, and credit challenges will eventually overcome your operational efficiency. And if we do implement them, you'll be better positioned for long-term growth than you've ever been. Technology integration done right doesn't eliminate the hospitality experience. It enhances it." Aunt Carol gathered her papers with movements that seemed automatic, her mind clearly working through calculations that went beyond financial projections. "The family dinner last week," she said finally. "Yes. I told you to stop playing pretend entrepreneur and get a real job. You did. While you were sitting there controlling $750 million in investment capital." "That's correct." She laughed suddenly, a sound that mixed embarrassment with genuine admiration. "No wonder you just said good advice and didn't argue. There didn't seem to be much point in arguing. How long have you had this kind of money?" "The portfolio reached $100 million about 3 years ago. It's grown considerably since then." "And you never mentioned it because?" I considered the question that had been implicit in every family gathering for 7 years. "Because every time I've tried to discuss my work, someone has explained that what I do isn't real business. It seemed easier to let everyone assume I was struggling with internet consulting than to prove I wasn't." Aunt Carol shook her head slowly. "We've been giving career advice to someone who's more successful than all of us combined. Success takes different forms. Apparently." Walking to the parking garage, I reflected on the week that had transformed everything. 7 days ago, I'd been the family disappointment who needed to stop playing pretend entrepreneur. Today, I was the strategic consultant offering to save a business from market forces I controlled. The offer was genuine. Morrison Hospitality was well run and deserved to survive. More importantly, helping them adapt to technology disruption would demonstrate something I'd never been able to explain in words. That real entrepreneurship wasn't about choosing between traditional business and digital innovation. It was about understanding how both could work together. My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. New investment opportunities identified in sustainable hospitality platforms. Should we deploy the liquidity from this week's divestiture? I smiled, typing back, let's discuss Monday. I might have a more interesting opportunity developing. Sometimes the best investment strategy was patience. Sometimes, it was knowing when market disruption created opportunities for everyone willing to adapt. And sometimes, it was simply proving that pretend entrepreneurs could build very real businesses indeed.